inspiring to see all of you here on a Saturday afternoon. It reminds me of our AYBI days when we came to colleges to make presentations. 3 days ago, I saw a movie, J. Edgar. Some of you may have seen that movie. And there was a dialogue over there which was very profound. That when morals decline and good men do nothing, evil flourishes. When good men do nothing, evil flourishes. And I thought that just kind of captured the situation we are in today. The question is no longer whether you want to do something. I don't think there is really a choice. You know, a society that is indifferent to a deteriorating situation is victimized by its own apathy. Therefore, act we must. And I think what Mumbai and a nation as a whole really needs is larger, stronger, active citizenship. And over the next maybe 2 or 3 hours, you'll be hearing from 9 speakers as to how each one of us has the power to bring about change. The only question, therefore, you need to ask yourself, and the set of questions I would ask if I was you is, number one, what is it that motivates you? Secondly, what are you truly passionate about? Third, how do you make a beginning? How do you start? Fourth, how do you actually make that beginning and start something which is sustainable, meaningful, and enjoyable? And lastly, how do you measure the impact of what you're doing? Now, each of these 5 questions, we can spend a lot of time, a lot can be discussed, but I will only say to you what Elizabeth Taylor said to each of her 9 husbands. I will not keep you too long. Let's talk about motivation. I think at the heart of trying to bring about change is a question you need to ask yourself, what is it that truly motivates you? And I've heard a wonderful story of Akbar. Tansen, as you know, was a fabulous singer in Akbar's court. So one day Akbar told Tansen, he said, Tansen, I want to listen to your guru sing. So Tansen organized a trip. They go to the guru's house. For the first night, nothing happened. Second day, nothing happened. On the third day, which was a full moon night, the guru starts singing. And he sang so beautifully that Akbar was completely mesmerized. On the way back, Akbar asks Tansen, he said, Tansen, you know the same raga and you are a great singer. Why is it that your guru sings better than you do? He said, Jahabara, the answer is very simple. I sing for you. He sings for the Lord. The higher the purpose, the greater will be your impact. If your motivation to bring about change and do some good is about self-glorification and looking good, you will of course have impact, but that will be limited impact. If your motivation is that your NGO or your organization is the best, the impact will be a little more, but still limited to what it can be. But if your motivation is your city, and you say, I'm doing this for Mumbai, you'll have a greater impact. If you truly understand and believe that every action of yours is having an impact to the country, the impact will be greater. And the moment you stop thinking about the boundaries and say that I need to touch the lives of people and make a positive impact to any human being on this planet, you will have the highest level of impact. So it's really about your motivation. And you have no idea as to what your thought or your idea can spark off and how many millions of lives you could potentially touch. I serve on the trust of IFC, which is earlier called MRA. In Panchkani, we're running a rural project on sanitation. And Soumya, who runs the project, she's developed something called a tippy tap, where in villages, you can actually wash your hands, and there's conservation of water, and it's a very simple system which the villagers can build for themselves. And I was there 2 weeks ago, and Soumya was telling me that they now have an inquiry from Africa where they want to set up more than 250 tippy taps. If her motivation was only herself and the villages around Panchkani, there would be limited impact. And that really is the starting point, that look beyond yourself. The second question is, where does your passion lie? Shaheen's passion lies in education. I mean, we could see that the moment I know Shaheen now, 25 years, we were in college together, and she is passionate about children and education. If you're clear about what you are passionate about, that's easy. But many of you, and I was one of them, many of you may just have the feeling that I want to do something. I want to make a difference. It's just the sense of wanting to bring about change. And I think that is a legitimate feeling which can bring about positive change. Because finally, it is that spirit and inspiration and passion which will propel you. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I was at a international conference on democracy in Panchkari, and we had a group of youngsters from Egypt who were part of the revolution. And I was standing next to one of them, and I asked him, I said, so is it difficult being part of the revolution? He said, well, yes, it is. I have marks all over my body. I said, really? He said, I have a bullet in my leg. So I said, are you scared? He said, no. At worst, I'll die. Now, that's the kind of passion people come with. And that's the passion that you need to have if you want to bring about change. So it doesn't matter if you're passionate about education, environment, children, women's issues, whatever, good governance, whatever it be. But make sure that the spirit of passion is always there with you. Now, how do you start? And a lot of youngsters, they ask the question, I want to do something, but I don't know where to start. And they say that, I'm just too small. I just study in college. I'm in junior college. I mean, I'm just too small. What kind of impact can I make? And let me share with you a true story. This child in America goes home crying. His mother asked him what happened, and he said that I wasn't selected for the team because I was too small. And she said something to him which changed his life forever. She said, it's not the size of the player in the game that matters. It's the size of the game in the player. Michael Jordan went on to become one of the greatest basketball players of the world. There is nothing like I am too small. I clearly remember when Shaheen started Akanksha, and she's going to tell you a lot about that, it was with a handful of children in a classroom in Xavier's College, if I remember right. And that's where it all started. And today it's become a national project with international recognition. But it started off with one person, with the passion, with the drive, and making the first step. And that is something which I would highly, highly recommend. Is that if you can find a cause or a purpose which you can identify with, make a beginning. Don't think too much, just start. The fourth question is, how do you make it sustainable? How do you make it enjoyable? And how do you make it meaningful? A lot of people start off with a lot of passion, and somewhere down the line, it kind of fizzles out. Some of you may have had that experience. The one principle which I have learned through my years of ISEC, AYBI, now with MRA, is always keep the purpose, the issue, or the beneficiary at the center of all your discussions and decisions. I remember when we started working on waste management, at that time, 20 years ago, people were talking about clean Bombay, green Bombay, keep your city clean. Harit Mumbai, Swachh Mumbai, I remember that. And we were amongst the first group who started talking about separation of garbage at source. And I remember we used to make presentations. We made up over 400 presentations to the government, to building societies, to NGOs. And a lot of people would come up to me and say that, what is this separation of garbage you're talking about? Now, what we really did is when we started the project, we started looking at garbage before we looked at anything else. We started understanding garbage better. So if you want to work in the space of children, before you start from your filter of what you think is right, start looking at the child from the child's eye. Look at your project. Keep that in the center of all discussions and decisions. I remember we followed a garbage truck all the way to Devnar, saw how garbage is collected, how it is dumped in a dumping ground, which is not a sanitary landfill, how the workers are working in what condition. We applied ourselves, applied our minds, went to Pune, learned of a project where they were generating zero garbage in a place called Kanchan Gali, went and met the lady, Lata Shrikhande, who had actually run that project, and came back to Bombay and said, this to our minds is the solution, the sustainable solution for waste management in Bombay. So my first thought to you is, look at the project from the eyes of the beneficiary. Second, assess your immediate strengths. Be realistic of what you can do. Go about and make that difference. It could be a handful of children in a classroom whom you begin to teach. But start with something which is realistic. Demonstrate success. You know, sometimes you get questioned and you say, even if I do this, what difference will I make? Even if I take a handful of children and I put them in a classroom and I start teaching them, what difference will it make? And I'm reminded of this lovely story I read about this. There was this beach which had millions of starfish on it. I'm sure some of you have heard this story before. And these starfish were washed ashore, and if they didn't go back in the water, they would die. And there was this child who was picking up the starfish and throwing it in the water. And this wise old man, he sees this child. This wise old man smiles, looks at the child and says, son, what are you doing? He says, well, you know, all these starfish, millions of them have been washed ashore. I'm throwing them back in the water. He says, there are millions of them. You think you're going to be able to make any difference? The child picks up a starfish, throws it in the water and says, I made a difference to that one. If you can make a difference in the life of one human being, you have made a substantial difference. Never forget that. It's not about the size of impact. If you are able to touch the heart of one person, you have made a difference. Now, how do you make this change sustainable? How do you make this meaningful, and how do you make this fun? You know, I'm a big believer that whatever you do has to have an element of fun. We're all dealing with real issues, real challenges, but it has to be fun. You know, I sit on the board of TOYBANK, and we've given them space in our company where they keep the volunteers come, they keep the toys, they wrap the toys, and you know, every week there are toys coming and the toys going, and the volunteers are sitting, and you have to see the energy that is created when they are sitting and wrapping those toys and cracking jokes and having, because that, remember one thing, you need to even sustain your own energy in and through the project you're working on. Don't ever forget that. So how do you make this sustainable? Now this is where art meets science. It's a little bit of art and science. Now there's always the romanticism about bringing about change, about your ideals, about making a difference, the spirit, and that's really what propels you and sustains you. But the purpose and the passion has to be backed with solid process. Just like the human spirit needs a body to express itself, so also your purpose and your passion needs a well-organized NGO organization to deliver the results. One is you need clarity of purpose. Be very clear what you're trying to achieve. There's a Japanese proverb which says that vision without action is a daydream. Vision without action is a daydream. But action without vision is a nightmare. Be very clear what you're trying to achieve. Second, you've got to have common shared goals and principles with the people you work with. network. And I think one of the things which Shaheen has demonstrated, and I keep taking her example because it's always inspiring whenever I meet her and I see her sitting right there, and it's the power of creating a network which you have to be open to, and that comes with your motivation. The moment you don't do it for yourself, but you do it for a higher purpose, you will automatically be open to working with other like-minded people to make a difference. Because then it's never going to be who has done it. The question is always going to be, did we make a difference? Most importantly, have a clear strategy. And I heard a wonderful story. Nehru wanted to start a revolution. And Gandhi told him, he said, if you fight the arrogance of their oppression with your arrogance of revolution, their arrogance will win. But if you fight their arrogance with humility, humility will win. There was a clear strategy as to what he wanted to achieve. So never underestimate the power of having a very simple and clear strategy. Finally, I would say, to make a meaningful difference, you have to work with conscience, compassion, commitment, and competence. You have to work for a higher purpose. When you work with compassion, it's not who is right, but what is right. When you work with competence, the solution has to always be larger than the problem, and you have to bring out the best from within. And there has to be a commitment. The last question you'd ask yourself is, how do you measure the impact? And I think this is one of the most important and difficult questions to answer. You need to understand a very simple rule of life, that the result and the impact is a combination of your effort and circumstances. Your effort is in your control, but circumstances are not. Therefore, the outcome is not in your control. The moment you understand that, A, it takes a big burden off you, and B, it brings about a certain amount of humility. That when things go right, you don't become arrogant, and when things go wrong, you don't get depressed. Therefore, the only place you need to focus on is your effort. The only thing you need to measure is, did I do my best in delivering the best to the person I wanted to? Sometimes the results will be better than expected, sometimes not. You know, a lot of people asked me that, what difference did AYBI make? And I used to say the same thing. I said, to be honest with you, I don't think we can measure the impact. Yes, we made 400 presentations, we did this project and that project, and a lot of things over those 12 years when AYBI lasted. But if you ask me, the single most significant, I would say, difference we made is that the 400 people who went through the AYBI experience are today active change agents wherever they are. And that is something which you will experience, that the biggest change will be within. You know, sometimes you find that you get frustrated. You're working very hard, you don't get the results. And after the war, Winston Churchill was invited to a college to speak, and everybody was waiting in anticipation for this great man to deliver a big speech after they'd won the war. And this is what he goes out and says. He said, never, never, never give up. And you have to carry that with you once you start working to bring about a change. At the International Conference on Democracy, Aung San Suu Kyi had sent us a taped message for the conference. And it's very interesting when she talked about the various players in a democracy. She singled out the family as the most important. And when you talk about doing something tangible for Mumbai, to my mind, the spirit in you has to be that in me is the Mumbai I want Mumbai to be. If you want Mumbai to be crime-free, then don't buy tickets in black. If you want Mumbai to have better law and order, then don't break the traffic signal. If you want people in government to deal with you with integrity and honesty, then make sure you're not cheating in the exams in college. In me should be the Mumbai I want Mumbai to be. Aruna Roy, we had lunch with her, and she said a very, very powerful thing. She said, ideas are not the privilege of the rich. Did you know that the right to information actually started off in a small village in Rajasthan? And once you understand that, then you open yourself up to 6 billion people who can help you bring about a change. I would like to conclude with my favorite quote by Confucius, that if there be righteousness in the heart, there is beauty in character. If there is beauty in character, there is harmony at home. If there is harmony at home, there is order in the nation. And if there be order in the nation, there is peace in the world. Thank you.